Today at the New Indian, we have with us Major General Rajiv Narayanan, who has retired from the Indian Army after 37 years of service. He has expertise in mechanized and modern warfare and actually served along both northern and western frontiers of India. He also has been a keen watcher of China and the Indo-Pacific. Welcome to Reason, the New Indians platform where we get to the reason behind the issues that concern you. Welcome, General Narayanan.
Thank you, Mrs. Aarti Tikoo. It's a pleasure, and I thank you for welcoming me onto your platform.
Let me begin this conversation with the military strategy of India. We know that you also have been working and focusing on the military restructuring of India. I want to understand, is India on the right track, given that there has been a certain shift in our military strategy? Many people in fact said that Agniveer scheme, for example, was a major paradigm shift in how we were looking at the modern warfare and how we need to now restructure and reorganize our thinking. Would you agree that there is a shift? And second, do you think we are going in the right direction?
While I agree there is a shift, slight, not as much as I would have liked it to be, and there is a shift in thinking, but it doesn't translate on ground, primarily because we hear a lot about theaterization, but we do not hear anything about what is the integrated military strategy, the tri-services. That's why the theaterization push is coming under stress from the other service chiefs, especially the Air Force. See, before you do any kind of force restructuring, we need to realize that when you restructure something, it lasts a very long time. It takes time to mature. And when you mature, are you ready in that structure to face the future battlefield? So that should be the crux of any change. And for that, you got to look at what should be the drivers of change and what are the challenges as you face today and what is the way ahead. How do you go about doing that? So the first thing is the evolving nature of warfare itself. If you look at the various Western and Russian writers, they talk of 7-8 generations of warfare, and that we are evolving from the 5th to the 6th and may go into the 7th. Indian structures are still looking at 2nd, 3rd generation of warfare, and with those structures, you are fighting the 4th generation, which is counter-terrorism, counter-militancy, and coin ops, and what they talk about. Next is very critical is the budgetary support, because there are evolving disruptive technologies that are coming up. We keep hearing about AI, quantum, and other issues that are coming up. These are very expensive. And so you need to see what kind of budgetary support and how do you generate economy of scales. If you look at it only through military expenditure, it may not work. And that leads to requirement of a civil, military, academia, and industrial fusion. I hear people talking of civil military, but no, civil, military, academia, and industry. That is how your budgetary support gets spread out.
Can you please, for the sake of our audience, explain what are these 1st generation, 2nd generations, 5th generation war and warfare? And why do you say that we are trying to fight with tools which were perhaps from the 2nd generation military warfare?
See, 1st generation warfare was the ancient warfare, massed attacks. Second generation happened when gunpowder came on the battlefield. So you had guns and artilleries. So which is what the First World War was very famous for, massed artillery fire and attacks. The third generation was mastered during the Second World War, was the deep attack, the blitzkrieg, and the manner in which maneuver warfare, which evolved, which is where we are. The fourth generation is the non-state actors, use of non-state actors, where you have the counterinsurgency, counter-militancy, counter-terrorism, those operations taking place. And you may add these mercenary groups also who come in and fight in various places. That is fourth generation. Fifth generation becomes non-contact. The long-range use of UCAVs, UAVs, like what we found during the Gulf War. And subsequently also the UCAVs and UAVs that were being used, cruise missiles, that is long-range vectors coming in. Now, sixth generation is when you look at swarm tactics, you look at AI being brought in, you look at the whiteouts of communications, use of satellite, militarization of space. This you're going into the sixth generation. The seventh generation is at the moment played out in the Hollywood, and it would at some time come in. That is, for a decision making, we talk of an OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, attack. So you first get the information, data, convert it into intelligence, and take a decision what you're going to do and execute that plan. Now, if I disrupt that, in the sense that I either delay the information that is coming to you by disrupting your communication systems, or I corrupt it so that you get a wrong input and you decide on something else. That is going into seventh generation, wherein a lot of your, what you find in Marvel, VFX and CGI and all these start coming in. So that would come in. Eighth generation is at the moment in the realms where it's totally non-contact, and you thoroughly confuse the enemy mentally, cognitively, and he doesn't know what he's doing. It is like he's been doped and he just surrenders. So that is the eighth generation which people are working towards. We are already seeing the fifth generation in these recent conflicts in Yemen, Nagorno-Karabakh, and now you are looking at the sixth generation evolving in Ukraine.
So, but sixth generation in Ukraine, and you were saying that all the conflicts that India is dealing with, or the wars that India has had, we've been way behind. You're saying that
you
we
have
are not
started some of these disruptive technologies within the military. You have started creating your nodes. Like I said, these are very expensive. The military alone you will not suffice. So you need your civil military academia and industrial fusion. That is the reason why, if you look at it in the recent 2 sessions that she had, he's created a science and technology commission which he heads. And there is a civil military academia industrial fusion there to work towards achieving this. These disruptive technologies don't come cheap. They're very, very expensive.
But we are also seeing, for example, in Ukraine war, we are also seeing conventional warfare. We are seeing men of
Correct. You're very right. This is what is hybrid. You will have your normal conventional operations. You will have your non-state actors also fighting. And you will have your fifth and sixth generation. And whenever you reach the seventh generation, it will be there. When you're doing all this, you are degrading, destroying, and disrupting the enemy. But physically, the conventional forces have to go in to secure those areas.
So the standoff India and China, for example, has had on the line of actual control in Ladakh. We saw a very primitive way of warfare. It was almost ancient. It was like coming to blows where men use their raw energy and nothing else, no weapons, no real machines. So do you feel that India is prepared to handle China, knowing that she, for example, is going towards that integrated 6th generation, 7th generation warfare? Do you think we're prepared, or are we going to just go, deal with them on a primitive?
At the moment, let me put it on record that the Chinese army is also in a similar situation, PLA, in a similar situation like ours.
Okay.
He's bringing in a whole lot of platform, but he doesn't have troops. That is why he's trying to bring in buying of these instructors from the US, West, Australians to come and teach them. You may bring in more platforms, but if you bring in more platforms than you can bring in trained manpower, then you have a problem what China is facing. There are more platforms than trained manpower available. You can't fight future wars with conscription. 40% of the Chinese army are conscripts. So you need a professional. That's why we have gone in for Agniveer. That is another step which they have taken, so that the person whom you get is a committed and a well-trained person. Whereas a conscript comes for just 2 years and he's off. He's not interested in fighting. He's interested in going off. So that is what we have done. And so, like I had mentioned about these budgetary but the most important is the integrated military strategy. The start point comes from a national security strategy. When you say national security, people always think, oh, that's military. No, there are many verticals for security. You have economic security, financial security, you have food security, education security, your commerce, your trade, data these days, information, cyber, socio-political security. So there are a number of verticals in security. So when you lay down your national security strategy, it covers all these. You always have a portion of that which is given in the open domain, which is very generic in nature. And there is a classified one which is given to people that this is how you're going to do. Based on that, you have to bring out your national defense strategy, that all these verticals, how are you going to defend? Military is also part of it. Internal security is also part. From there comes your integrated military strategy. When you have enunciated your integrated military strategy, from there you evolve what kind of capabilities do you need to execute your military strategy. And once you have identified your capabilities, that is when you decide what kind of structures I need to effectively utilize these capabilities to execute the strategy. Now, the first two has not fructified, and we are jumping directly to the third, to create integrated structures, which is where I have my worries. Maybe I'm wrong. They have something penned. I retired almost 7 years ago now. Maybe they have penned something. It was not there at that time. So post-retirement 2017 was one when I had written about an integrated military strategy 2040 for India and what capabilities should be there.
Before I ask you to explain what this integrated military strategy should be, apart from, you did say that we need to cover all the aspects, whether it's food security, whether it's environmental security and other things. But before that, I would like you to explain for our audience that if China has more platforms and does not have enough trained men or do not have enough committed soldiers, what is the likely scenario that can unfold between India and China over the disputes that we have along the line of actual control?
We have that agreement that we will not open fire, and that has held since 1975, it was the last time when firing was done. He doesn't want to provoke. because if it happens, then it's war. Even if a person locally has opened fire, it is very difficult thereafter to manage the escalation. In military jargon, it is called escalation control matrix. How do you control the escalation? It becomes very difficult. And a local flagration then becomes a large war. Now, whether it stays within that particular sector or expands, it becomes very difficult to control. Like in our case, 99, when it happened, at least the Americans had stepped in and put pressure on both sides to make sure that it didn't expand beyond J&K. Who would step in if such a thing happens with China? That is the reason the clubs, and that is the reason the latest input I read today, that he is buying more such clubs. Because he suddenly realized in Yangtze, India was very well prepared with those kind of clubs. And within those clubs, we had added tasers.
Yes.
So it became very effective. So he is also going for the same thing. In my reading, it will take him at least minimum till 2030 to become effective, to have soldiers as much as the platforms that are there. So he's facing these issues at the moment. How to, like one of the reports which I have put it in my book, which is pending publication with Lancers, the Air Force doesn't have normal rotable spares. He's concentrating so much on making new platforms, modern aircrafts. There are no spares available. So every equivalent, what we call the squadron, like he calls a battalion, every battalion has been given additional aircrafts to cannibalize and utilize. You can't fight battles that way. It's okay for peacetime to maintain your aircraft. You can't fight wars that way if you don't have your logistics in place. Now, that is a telling statement, especially Air Force. And I'm sure it will be the same problem with the ground forces, with his rocket force, and also especially his Navy, where he's putting in so much attention to bringing new platforms. Almost within 2 to 3 months, he has a new platform.
And could that be a possibility that, since China is not really prepared to get into a full-fledged war with India, it is looking at alternatives. It's looking at tactical alliances with Pakistan. I mean, they're actually bailing out Pakistan with Pakistan's economy collapsing. They're trying to help them as much as they can.
See, Chinese method of fighting the war is very different. We shouldn't put our template on them. He will fight when he's ready. Before he fights, he always aims to make any nation hollow from inside. Burn it from inside. That's why I say he's aptly called the dragon. Dragons don't bite. They burn you. And then they bite the remnants. He does the same thing. That is where Xi Jinping, Deng Xiaoping had coined this phrase, comprehensive national power. West looks at economy, diplomacy, and military. But Deng Xiaoping had brought in a very important vertical, which was there in our ancient books written by Chanakya, Arthashastra, Niti Shastra, where man was very important. So he has brought in the human vertical. You subvert the human, you have subverted the nation. Simple. That is the lesson they learned from Mao Zedong, how they recovered and fought after the long march. They subverted the locals, the peasants, and that's how they fought. They became the fighters for them. So within a nation, he is going to subvert you. That is his primary method of fighting you.
Once is that his primary goal? Is that his primary goal with India?
Yes. Sun Tzu, they follow Sun Tzu. The acme of generalship is to win without fighting. You will only go to war when you are assured of victory. Is he assured of victory today? No, he is not. He will try to denude you. And in that, Pakistan is the cat's paw. And he's hoping that Turkey will be able to do something along with Pakistan to India, though Turkey is too far away from us. But he could be able to assist Pakistan in the non-contact warfare using non-state actors.
So what do you think how is China going to approach Pakistan? What utilization can it have with a destabilized Pakistan or with a stabilized Pakistan?
He would have preferred Pakistan to be stable, and he's trying to reach out to Afghanistan to see what he can do. It's not working. He's made an attempt and tried to make a big show of what he has done with Saudi Arabia and Iran. But we should not forget that talks between Saudi Arabia and Iran have been going on in Iraq. No, in Iraq, 5-6 sessions they have had. And most important, what we have to remember is this was NSA level. This is not even the minister's level. It is NSA level from both sides have discussed. So let's see how that transpires. China faces a problem of funding. Where does he get the money from? If you look at it, his eastern seaboard, most of the ports, there is what is called CAX, Container Availability Index. Anything less than 0.5 means there is excellent traffic going on, because you're not going to get containers because the containers are moving out. Across his eastern seaboard, the average CAX availability is between 0.65 to 0.7. That means there is no trade going on. Containers are readily available. Container is readily available. That means there's no trade. If there is no trade, where is the money? 80 to 85% of Chinese economy depends on exports. So he is looking at these dilemmas today, and that is why I think today they have shed with the wolf diplomacy. It didn't pay dividends. And he wants to show a good face. So while Chingang has been made the foreign minister, but Wang Yi has still been kept above him, because he is the head of the foreign affairs in the CPC.
Yes, even with so many challenges economically and militarily also, but China hasn't, you can say, receded its claim either on Taiwan, or it hasn't receded from the claim it makes on South China Sea. It keeps, in fact, it has optically at least has shown that it controls both and it has a legitimate right over both.
See, all these had been in place even under Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao. They were doing in a quiet manner, in a slow and steady movement. And under Hu Jintao, when people got worried about China's rise, so he coined those phrases: peaceful rise, harmonious rise, we'll do it together. But Xi Jinping appears to be a man in a hurry. He wants to earn a name for himself. He became aggressive, and he started pushing this aggressively, and all these came out in the open. Now, today, what has happened is, who are his allies? North Korea, Pakistan, Iran, and to some extent, Turkey. That's it. Baki, Cambodia, Laos. Do they have a standing?
But wouldn't you say with RCEP, they try to at least have some kind of economic consolidation, some kind of economic cooperation in Southeast Asia. And in fact, most Southeast Asian countries went along with it, even as there were other choices as well.
Andrew Hall had written a beautiful book on China's Asian Dream. And the way the Chinese have taken control of ASEAN, less Singapore and Indonesia, they invest and invest till they control at least 10 to 12% of your GDP. Then you are scared to antagonize the Chinese because they threaten to pull out. And no country can take an economic hit of a double-digit pullout on the GDP. The classic example I'll give you is of Vietnam. Vietnam, if you remember, it was around 2011 or so when the first standoff took place with the Chinese on the drilling issue where they had brought in into the South China Sea near Vietnam. What was the reaction? The Vietnamese people went to town and burnt all the Chinese factories and establishments. At that point in time, the Chinese investment in Vietnam was about bare 5 to 7% of the GDP. The Chinese within a week pulled out, said sorry, everything. Though in that people didn't realize some South Korean, some Japanese firms also got burnt. Cut to 2018. Again, a standoff happens. What is the reaction in Vietnam? They went running to town to all countries to say, you must blame the Chinese. No people came out. At that time, Vietnamese controlled 14% of the Vietnamese GDP. See the difference in the reaction.
Yeah.
That time, the government permitted the people to do. This time, the government didn't permit the people to do. That is the way the Chinese want to avoid the Thucydides trap. Geo-economic hold on countries. So you gain or coerce your influence in that region. And you achieve your aims.
So to that,
RCEP, it was obvious that the ASEAN countries would support. I was surprised why Singapore was singing paeans for RCEP. Because the Chinese investment within Singapore and within Indonesia is not there. India refused because it was not getting amicable say in that, and Indian markets would have suffered, Indian industry would have suffered. So let's see how the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum works out. IPEF is coming in.
yes. Now coming to Indo-Pacific, does India really have an Indo-Pacific strategy? I mean, we hear China talking a lot about its navy. We hear a lot about in China's influence in South China Sea. We hear a lot about China's influence trying to make inroads into Indian Ocean as well and in the Indo-Pacific as well. But where is India's Indo-Pacific strategy? What is that strategy if there is one at all?
Yeah, India is looking more at the Indian Ocean, not as much as the Pacific portion. But before that, let us clarify that there is a divergence of understanding within the partners in the Indo-Pacific as to what is the spread of the Indo-Pacific. India says the spread of the Indo-Pacific is from the eastern shores of Africa till the western shores of the American continent, both North and South America. The spread is still there and includes within Asia, and Africa, includes the continental portion also, because there are countries which have maritime boundaries, also have contested continental boundaries. And there are nations which are landlocked, which depend on these waters for their trade. Just take Nepal, take Bhutan, Zambia, Gambia, to name a few. They depend on these waters, so we include them. Take US. For the US, the Indo-Pacific is the boundaries of Indo-Pacific. That means it runs from Hawaii and ends on the western borders of India, south of Gujarat. Because north of Gujarat is the CENTCOM. And thereafter, the balance Arabian Sea and the south-western Indian Ocean is AfricaCom. For the others in the region, they're looking only at the Indian Ocean, Western Pacific, and South Pacific. So firstly, we are not clear as to till where is the footprint. That is number one. Number two, I personally feel that if you look at all the arrangements and agreements that are existing in Asia and Africa, enormous amounts of multilateral, bilateral, trilateral MOUs, agreements, arrangements, you call it, and it's overlapping. You look at Africa also, similar cases there, it is overlapping. How do you, and whatever is the basket of money that you have is the same. How do you ease out everything so that there is a better utilization of money? That is not being thought of. People look at Quad. Quad is a dialogue.
Yes.
Quad is not an umbrella. It is just a security dialogue.
Yeah.
So you are just talking. So unless you have a Indo-Pacific, say, framework or some commission with a secretariat, which brings in all these verticals under themselves, so that you are able to sort out the problems. Extending a little bit my talk, if you just look at Asia, SDG was given out by the UN in 2015 to be completed by 2030. ADB came out with a detailed financial requirement in a report in 2017, February 2017. Asian countries needed then $30 trillion. And bulk of it was for infrastructure, energy, and clean water, sanitation. These were the major issues. So China, I feel, has made a better use of that by came in initially with BRI, so people joined in, but then people have now realized that BRI is more to do with China than for themselves because it became a debt trap. Mm-hmm. But if China was using that, nobody else used it. The only architecture which provided a viable alternative, I would say, was Asia-Africa Growth Corridor supported by Japan and India, under which Colombo port was made and some African ports we had invested in and work was going on, where people have appreciated that. But then you can't match the pockets of the Chinese. So if everybody gets together, build ARIA, build Better Back, whatever the names they give, various acronyms the Americans have come in, but you try to go independently, it doesn't work that.
Well, the other acronym that now we hear quite often is AUKUS. Australia, US, UK coming together as a military grouping for the Indo-Pacific and countering China. Do you think that this military grouping is one, does it really have the strategy right? Will this strategy work?
When you look at AUKUS, so I'll start with the Americans first.
Yeah.
Pivot to Asia, rebalancing Asia, everything, big talk. Mm-hmm. How many boots have come on the ground? Nothing.
No.
Have anything changed as far as the Indo-PACOM strength concerned? No. So what is this pivot to Asia or rebalancing Asia? Has more money come this side? No. So these are just phrases coined to keep people happy that this is where it is. Now you like AUKUS. AUKUS was essentially to sideline French.
Yeah.
The French had a deal with them. Now, while have Australians ever functioned with a nuclear sub? Never in their life. When was the last time they functioned on subs? During Second World War. Do they have trained crews to function on sub? No. By when will this submarine fructify and when will it be effective? It will be at least 10 years. They have still not started making anything. Now they are saying that they will take the British technology. Everything is how to make money for the military industrial complex. So they will take the technology from the British, add-ons will come from the Americans, and then they will make this sum. Does Australia have the manpower to man these subs?
So so are you saying that the entire purpose of AUKUS was just to spite France and to keep France up?
Because there is a big divide within NATO itself, where the continental powers, the old continental powers like France and Germany, are not aligned with UK and US.
Yeah.
Or what is now termed as the Anglo-Saxon group. That is UK, Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah.
Okay. So France was coming in, and France is a legitimate Indo-Pacific resident power. It has islands, territories in Indian Ocean and in the Pacific, South Pacific. But the Americans are not keen. They're not keen to even add them into Quad.
But as we know, and as you rightly pointed out, Quad is a dialogue. There is nothing else except for the maybe some level of economic cooperation. But what is then the world's Indo-Pacific strategy? India is looking at Indian Ocean. West is, restricted itself to NATO, and I mean, for the sake of optics, AUKUS. What is the strategy of the West, the biggest superpowers of the world?
Their strategy in involving India is the only big power available to them with a sizable navy is India. And they want India to come into the Pacific to fight their wars. Why should I fight their wars? I have my continental problem with China. Maritime problem has not yet come up.
Yeah.
We are strong and we will see how to manage that. Why should I go into the Western Pacific and fight his battles there?
Fair enough.
Let him fight his battles. Now, one I will add. We talk of the 9-dash line. Who made out the 11-dash line? Claims on Arunachal and Tibet. Who brought it into their parliament? When it was Republic of China and it was Chiang Kai-shek. It was 11-dash line. Okay. It became 9 when after 75, when communist Vietnam, with the support of communist China, defeated USA. So that was the time when Mao Zedong dropped these 2 lines of the Vietnamese area and made it a 9-dash line. Has the Republic of China, which is in Taiwan, passed and made any resolution to say that they will have no claims on 9-dash line? No. Have they said they will have no claims on South Tibet? No.
But do you therefore feel that we gave shelter to Tibetans in exile? We have also been home to Dalai Lama. We have, after 1962 war with China, although there is an agreement that there will be no fire, but there is this constant either skirmish, constant battle. What exactly can India do or should India do to resolve issues with China amicably without going to war? Is that even possible?
No. Chiang Kai-shek was the person, when he was fighting Mao Zedong, he made the famous mention, I think it was in late 30s, that there can be no 2 suns in the sky. Okay, they can be only one son. And Chinese are following it to the T, that in Asia there can be only one son, which is China. So he will not accept any other nation as an equal. And India is not going to accept second fiddle to China. That's where it stands. And that's why I said that it's your military and economy. You have to maintain that balance.
Then why aren't we talking enough about Tibet? Why don't we? In fact, we have shown certain kind of, you can say, perhaps skepticism or doubt with, we tried to stop Dalai Lama from going to Arunachal Pradesh a couple of times. We have been following a very unclear, ambiguous line on Tibet.
I won't say unclear. It's a quiet line and you leave it to ambiguity. Once you become strong, that's when you open your cards. You don't open your cards before.
Do you foresee that India can have both and there will be a certain equilibrium in military advancement, military technology, as well as economic advancement?
You have no choice. You are living in such a VUCA world, which has become worse after the Ukraine war. Now, if you have come up today in G20 and said that you will be the voice of the global South, and let's be clear, global South is about 150 odd countries. That means you are saying that you will be the voice of virtually the globe. Other than the developed and some developing countries, rest you are saying that you will be the voice. Will the global powers agree? Already write-ups have started coming up of rise of India is going to upset the global power balance.
They don't want another China.
They know India is not going to be a China, but other powers will not like. See, the pie is the same. They would not like the pie to be reduced. The biggest worry today, especially in the West, is they are facing recession. Now, while they may write this, they are also very keen to do business with India. That's the only growing economy that is there.
And that's where my question comes into, that that while we are not willing to participate or cooperate with them in securing their, you can say, their security in the Indo-Pacific, but we have the expectation, or we think that we have the leverage that they can do trade with us on our terms.
Yeah, see, our Minister Jaishankar had very clearly mentioned the problem with China has been ongoing. Who has stood by us and shouted at China the way these people are shouting at Russia? Has anybody done it? No. So why should I do for you anywhere? The charity begins at home. You want me to do something, then you have to stand by me and start shouting. If you can't shout and impose sanctions on them, the biggest problem is, I would put it bluntly, avarice. The MNCs wanted to make a ton of money, which China was ready to provide in the early 2000s. So through the 90s, they spent a whole lot of money and helped China prepare its infrastructure. 2001, they forced Chinese entry into WTO when China was not even following any of the rules of WTO, and it doesn't follow even today. Why? Because if China was not in WTO, the MNCs could not open their factories there. Now they've opened up their factories there. Even today, except for iPhone, which face so much of a problem out there in their factories and other things that they are planning to ship big time into India, which other factory is opening up into India big time? The amount of profits they earn from there is enormous.
But explain to me, what is our Indian Ocean strategy? We know that China has been able to buy several ports. We saw what happened in Sri Lanka. We also know they're trying to have access to Africa through the sea, through the ocean. So what I want to understand is, when you say that we are going to focus only on Indian Ocean and we are not going to meddle in the Indo-Pacific, are we, do we have no security threats from the Indo-Pacific?
No. When we say, what I was implying was we won't have physical presence there, but we will provide them with the backup, like the sale of BrahMos to Philippines. Vietnam has also expressed interest in our BrahMos missiles. So we will sell them those things which will improve their security standoff with Chinese.
Okay.
As far as the Indian Ocean is concerned, we have a concept called the diamond necklace.
Yes.
We too are in talks with various countries like Oman, the Duqm port is there, Mauritius, Seychelles. We come to Indonesia, we have berthing and port facilities. We are developing their port, which is right at the mouth of the Malacca Straits. So we also are following this pattern of which we term it as the diamond necklace. If the Chinese attempting a string of pearls, we are going in for a diamond necklace.
Yes, but what is the leverage that we are going to use? I mean, China, you yourself acknowledge that nobody can match the Chinese purse. So how are we going to fulfill this diamond necklace strategy?
You find that the manner in which the Chinese went about it, look at the kind of pushback they got in Sri Lanka. Look at what has happened in Pakistan today. Can you depend on Pakistan? Is the Gwadar port complete? No. Your Chabahar is complete. And you're sending the shipment of wheat into Afghanistan via Chabahar.
Yeah.
Right. So when you look at that, the manner in which we go about it is we provide them an alternate method for growth. See, the Chinese come in with all the material from China, the labor from China, the running is also from China. Like you take this famous train, which they have made the standard gauge rail for Kenya, which runs from the port to the capital. Everything is run by the Chinese. The staff on the train, the drivers, everybody is Chinese. There's no jobs for the locals except for an odd job. That's about all. Whereas when we went into Colombo and started making another terminal for them in the Colombo port, which is run mostly by the Chinese with Japanese, we trained those people. And we said, okay, after 5 years, you will run the port. Now, there's a total difference of how you do it. Now, that is where people welcome you.
So what you're essentially saying is that India's policy is honest and there is integrity in our approach. And that's...
And when we say, like Prime Minister Modi in 2018 had mentioned Sagar, security and growth for all in the region, that's what you're doing. What he says for the country is what he's doing. Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, and you get Sabka Vishwas. So people are supportive of you that you're doing it. The locals in Sri Lanka today are very happy with you. You look at Afghanistan, despite the Taliban being there, because you are helping out the locals and everything, what you say, you're giving it to them. They can't afford to be anti you because they survive on the support of the locals. He wants you to come in. Mining is not giving it to the Chinese. He says, you come and do the mining, because he knows that when we go to do the mining, we will train the locals.
You painted a very positive image of India militarily. It seems that we shouldn't be really as anxious as many are trying to make us anxious vis-a-vis China as well as Pakistan. But I want to understand, what are the areas which you referred in passing? what are the areas where India needs to focus immediately?
Immediately is your problems that are going to come out from along the LAC and the LOC. It will happen. Just because Chinese Pakistan economy is going down, don't think that he cannot utilize his non-state actors, because the non-state actors are funded from drug money.
Yeah.
And the drug trade is flourishing.
Yes.
Apart from that, the Pakistan military it's a military incorporation, if I may coin Ayesha Siddiqa's phrase. It's a military business.
Yeah.
So, and the earnings are equivalent to 20% of the GDP of China, Pakistan. So how much money from that gets funded into non-state actors, you don't know. So we have to be careful that just because his situation has become so bad and that his military is not able to fight and attack for 3 days, that doesn't mean non-state actors will not be utilized. They still can be utilized. So you got to guard and be on guard for that. And that is why I say that your military security, or the expenditure that you put for your security forces, which includes your police, the CAPF, the military, and the economy, you got to maintain a balance. That balance is essential. You can't say this less and that more. No, it won't work. Unless you have a secure environment, external and internal, it is very difficult to gain your economic growth.
Well, thank you so much for this fascinating conversation. It was really enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be on this.
Pleasure.